I woke up in Los Angeles to a knock on my house door at around 3:45 in the morning. Someone who's worked for my family for, God, probably 30 years now was knocking on my door. And when I looked through my window and I saw it was him, I just knew something bad had happened. And I was informed that, my father had passed. Yeah, so I immediately, I don't know, just pain, just sadness and pain, and just...
What Jack Osbourne finally revealed will completely rewrite everything you thought you understood about one of rock and roll's most famous families. This confession isn't about the glitz of celebrity life or the madness of metal legends. This is about a young man who carried weight no teenager should ever have to bear, watching his hero crumble while trying desperately not to fall apart himself. The truth is far more devastating than anything that made it onto your television screen. Everyone remembers the chaos of that reality show. The eccentric rocker stumbling through his mansion, the family dysfunction played for laughs.
Your mental health just takes a huge toll. And it did, and I was just suffering from really bad just depression and suicidal ideation, and just it was dark.
The seemingly endless parade of bizarre moments that made the Osbournes' appointment television. But what the cameras never captured was the teenager standing just out of frame, holding his breath every single day, waiting for the moment when everything would finally collapse.
I want to thank everyone. Love them.
Beyond repair. That teenager was carrying secrets that would have crushed most grown adults. And he did it with a smile because someone had to keep the show running. Picture this scene from 2003. Jack is 17 years old when he makes a frantic emergency call. His father has crashed an ATV on their estate, and when Jack reaches him, he finds Ozzy broken and bleeding, consciousness fading. In that crystallizing moment of terror, calling for help with shaking hands, something fundamental shifts in Jack's understanding of the world. The indestructible icon who survived every excess imaginable, who became a legend by defying death itself, suddenly looks fragile and human and mortal. That realization carved itself into Jack's psyche in ways he wouldn't fully understand until years later. But while Jack was busy saving his father's physical life, something insidious was happening to his own. Being born into rock royalty came with a price tag nobody discussed. It wasn't about living up to impossible expectations or dealing with public scrutiny. The real burden was infinitely heavier. Every time his father stumbled, Jack was there to catch him. Every time the family structure started cracking, Jack became the glue. Every time the world demanded entertainment, Jack surrendered another piece of who he actually was to maintain the illusion. The weight was suffocating him slowly, and nobody noticed because he'd gotten too good at hiding it. Here's the part that cuts deepest. Jack spent his formative years being more emotionally mature than every adult in his orbit. While his peers stressed over algebra tests and weekend plans, Jack was navigating family emergencies, creating cover stories for his father's absences, and maintaining composure when cameras started rolling. He developed an almost supernatural ability to read Ozzy's moods, to sense when darkness was approaching, to intervene before catastrophe struck. This hypervigilance became Jack's default state of existence, and it was quietly destroying him from the inside out. The cruel irony of Jack's story is almost too painful to comprehend. Watching his father battle addiction should have terrified him away from substances entirely. Instead, it drew him magnetically closer. The logic was devastatingly simple in Jack's mind. If chemicals could temporarily erase his father's suffering, perhaps they could silence the screaming inside his own head too. The boy who spent years trying to pull his father back from the edge ended up stepping over that same edge himself. The son became the mirror image of everything he'd been fighting against. Consider the absurdity of this reality. Jack Osbourne at 19 years old is checking himself into rehabilitation facilities while simultaneously attempting to manage his father's recovery process. Two generations locked in the same battle, both trying desperately to rescue each other while drowning in identical darkness. This wasn't a functional family dynamic. This was a survival mechanism that was slowly killing them both, and neither could figure out how to stop the cycle. But addiction wasn't even Jack's most shocking revelation. The real devastation lived in the silence. Here was a family that became famous for exposing their dysfunction to millions of viewers, yet they harbored secrets the cameras never came close to capturing. Jack carried these secrets in isolation. The nights when Ozzy couldn't recall his own identity. The mornings when Jack physically dressed his father because trembling hands made it impossible. The panicked calls from concert venues asking if the headliner would actually show up, and Jack reciting explanations he'd memorized like a script. Jack transformed into something no child should ever become. He was his father's interpreter to the outside world, his shield against harsh reality, his emotional life support system. All of this before he could legally purchase alcohol. The psychological toll was astronomical. Jack felt trapped by responsibility, because in his teenage logic, if he ever stopped managing everything, his father would die and the family would implode, and the blame would rest entirely on his shoulders. That's not childhood. That's a prison sentence disguised as love. The world's perception of Jack was completely inverted from reality. Everyone saw the rebellious kid, the troublemaker who couldn't handle the spotlight. The truth was exactly opposite. Jack handled absolutely everything. He was the single person in that household who never broke character, never stopped performing the role assigned to him, never allowed himself the luxury of falling apart because someone had to remain standing, and that someone was always Jack. The pressure didn't just damage his relationship with his father, it obliterated his relationship with himself. Jack confessed something that reveals the true depth of his struggle. For years, he genuinely didn't know who he existed as outside of being Ozzy's son. Outside of being the family's crisis manager, outside of being everyone's emotional crutch. His own identity had been completely devoured by the role he was forced to play. And when Jack finally hit his breaking point, when his own addiction spiraled into freefall, he understood something absolutely terrifying. He'd become a reflection of his father, but with one critical difference. His father had people who would catch him when he fell. Jack had spent so long catching everyone else that when gravity finally claimed him, he was falling through empty space with no safety net below. That's when everything transformed. That's when Jack made a choice that would either save them both or permanently destroy whatever fragile connection remained between them. What came next would redefine everything Jack believed about being a son, about protection, about what it means to be human. The Osbournes' reality show wasn't entertainment. It was camouflage. While America laughed at manufactured chaos, Jack was surviving trauma that would shatter most fully developed adults. Behind those cameras existed darkness the editing room never touched. The show portrayed Ozzy's erratic behavior as endearing eccentricity, but Jack lived with the brutal reality underneath. There were disappearances that lasted days, requiring elaborate lies to everyone asking questions. There were mornings when Jack would discover his father unconscious in dangerous places, forcing him to clean up evidence before the rest of the household woke. But here's what will destroy you. Jack wasn't just covering for addiction, he was concealing complete mental breakdowns. The show framed Ozzy as adorably confused, but Jack witnessed something far more sinister. Episodes where Ozzy didn't recognize his own children. Moments when the man who raised him would stare at Jack like he was a complete stranger. And Jack, still a teenager, had to pretend this was normal while his heart shattered into smaller and smaller pieces. The emotional damage wasn't intentional, but it was relentless. Ozzy in altered states would say things to Jack that carved permanent scars into his soul. Blame for family problems, accusations of insufficient care, proclamations of disappointment. Then sobriety would return and Ozzy would remember nothing. But Jack remembered everything. Every cutting word, every broken promise, every moment when his father's eyes held emptiness instead of recognition. Sharon fought her own battles with Ozzy's behavior, dealing with her own trauma, often unable to shield Jack from emotional shrapnel. So Jack learned self-protection, which meant constructing walls so impenetrable that even family couldn't reach him when he needed them most. While drowning in his father's chaos, Jack discovered something that made everything exponentially worse. He'd inherited more than just a famous surname. He'd inherited addictive tendencies, self-destructive patterns, the capacity to hurt people who loved him most. But unlike his father, Jack possessed awareness. He could watch himself transforming into the very thing that traumatized him, and he was powerless to prevent it. The secret Jack carried alone was this fear, not just of losing his father to addiction, but of becoming his father. That terror consumed him from within. Every drink, every pill, every destructive decision felt like another step toward becoming the person who'd caused him such profound pain. It was a nightmare with no exit. The most devastating secret involved their dynamic during Jack's own addiction. Everyone assumed Ozzy would understand, that he'd provide support, that shared experience would create connection. Reality was inverted. Ozzy was paralyzed by terror, not just of losing Jack, but of confronting how his own behavior had contributed to his son's destruction. The guilt was suffocating Ozzy, meaning when Jack needed his father most, Ozzy was emotionally unavailable, drowning in shame and regret. Jack found himself in an impossible position, fighting addiction while managing his father's guilt about that addiction, patient and therapist simultaneously, victim and caretaker. The pressure was more lethal than the substances themselves. During Jack's darkest period, at absolute rock bottom, he stumbled upon something that changed everything. Ozzy had been keeping detailed journals throughout Jack's entire childhood, private writings documenting every paternal failure, every absence, every way he felt he'd damaged his son. Pages and pages of regret, love, and desperation from someone who appeared completely oblivious to his impact. Jack discovered these journals accidentally, and what he read demolished every assumption he'd constructed about his father. Ozzy wasn't just aware of the damage, he was tormented by it. Every absence Jack felt, Ozzy had documented. Every disappointment, every broken promise, every moment when Jack needed him and he wasn't there, Ozzy had recorded his own failure with brutal honesty. But here's what made it even more heartbreaking. In those journals, Ozzy wrote about his fear that Jack would be better off without him, that perhaps the kindest thing he could do as a father was maintain distance, to stop inflicting chaos on his son's life. Ozzy believed his absence was protection. Jack interpreted it as abandonment. Both of them were drowning separately, each convinced they were protecting the other by suffering alone. They were both trying to save each other while destroying themselves, and neither knew the other was doing the exact same thing. That's when Jack realized something that would revolutionize their entire relationship. The problem wasn't insufficient love. The problem was that his father loved him so intensely that fear of causing harm was preventing him from providing help. And Jack's fear of becoming his father was preventing him from accepting his father's love. What happened next defied every expectation, shattered every rule of their toxic dynamic, and ultimately saved both their lives. But first, Jack had to risk destroying their relationship completely. Armed with devastating knowledge from those journals, Jack made a decision that shocked everyone, including himself. Instead of weaponizing those journals, instead of confronting his father with anger, Jack did something nobody anticipated. He wrote his own letter to Ozzy, and what he said in that letter changed everything. But here's the twist. Jack didn't deliver the letter immediately. First, he did something requiring more courage than anything else in his life. He got clean. Not for family, not for career, not for public image. He got clean specifically to have one honest conversation with his father while they were both sober. One conversation where neither hid behind substances, behind excuses, behind the chaos that had defined their relationship for decades. When Jack finally approached his father with that letter, Ozzy's reaction defied expectations. Instead of defensiveness or denial, instead of the emotional walls that had separated them for so long, Ozzy broke down completely. Not the dramatic, performative breakdown the world was accustomed to seeing, but a quiet, devastating collapse of someone who'd been carrying unbearable guilt for 20 years. That's when Jack did something that redefined what it means to be a son. Instead of demanding apologies, instead of listing grievances, instead of trying to make his father pay for pain caused, Jack looked at this broken man and said words that would heal them both. "Dad, I forgive you. But more importantly, you need to forgive yourself." This wasn't just forgiveness. This was Jack in his early 20s becoming the parent his father had never been able to be. A complete role reversal that should have felt wrong, but instead felt natural, because Jack realized Ozzy hadn't failed to grow up out of selfishness or cruelty. He'd failed to grow up because nobody had ever taught him how. Instead of Ozzy teaching Jack about life and responsibility, Jack started teaching Ozzy. He taught him how to communicate without substances. He taught him how to sit with uncomfortable emotions without fleeing. He taught him how to be present instead of always escaping to the next distraction. Ozzy, this legendary performer who'd commanded audiences of millions, became his son's most dedicated student. He started attending Jack's recovery meetings, not as the famous father, but as someone genuinely wanting to learn how to be better. He asked Jack questions about emotions, about relationships, about handling stress without destroying everything around him. The transformation was remarkable, but never easy. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns tried resurfacing, Times when both wanted to retreat into familiar dysfunction because healing was more painful than staying broken. But Jack held the line. Every time his father started slipping into old behaviors, Jack would call him out with love, with firmness, with accountability Ozzy had never experienced before. Jack wasn't trying to fix his father. He was teaching his father how to fix himself. And Ozzy, for the first time in his life, was learning what it felt like to have someone believe in his capacity to change, not just hope that he would change. The breakthrough moment came when Ozzy finally read Jack's letter. In it, Jack had written about his fear of becoming his father, but also about his gratitude for inheriting his father's strength, his resilience, his ability to survive impossible circumstances. Jack had taken everything that made Ozzy destructive and found a way to transform it into something healing. Then Jack revealed something that left everyone speechless. He told his father that the journals, filled with regret and self-hatred, had actually saved his life. Because reading them, Jack realized his father's love had always been there, buried under layers of addiction and trauma, but never absent. And knowing that changed everything about how Jack saw himself, their relationship, his future. Ozzy's response was the most honest thing he'd ever said to his son. "You became the man I always wanted to be." In that moment, the generational cycle of trauma, addiction, and emotional unavailability was finally broken. But the story doesn't end there. Just when Jack thought they'd found peace, just when he believed they could finally have the father-son relationship they'd both always wanted, he received a message that would test everything they'd built together. That message came through a phone call from his sister Kelly, crying, telling Jack that their father was struggling again. Not with substances this time, but with something deeper, something threatening to unravel all the progress they'd made. Ozzy was battling severe depression, convinced that despite all their healing, he'd still irreparably damaged his children. The guilt was consuming him again. Guilt about the guilt, shame about the shame, a recursive loop of self-destruction pulling him back into darkness. Jack faced a choice that would define the rest of their relationship. He could step back, protect his own recovery, maintain the healthy boundaries he'd worked so hard to establish. Or he could risk everything he'd built for himself to save his father one more time. Jack chose love. But here's what makes his decision so remarkable. He didn't revert to being his father's caretaker, his emotional manager, his keeper of secrets. Instead, he approached this crisis as an equal. As someone who understood that healing isn't a destination, but a daily choice you have to make repeatedly. Jack didn't rescue his father. He reminded his father how to rescue himself. The conversation they had during that crisis became the template for every interaction they would have moving forward. Jack told his father something that revealed the true emotional truth of their entire journey. "Dad, you didn't break me. You taught me how to be unbreakable. Everything you went through, everything we went through, it didn't damage me. It prepared me." That's when Jack shared the most profound realization of his entire life. He told his father that all those years of chaos, all those moments of having to be stronger than he should have been, all that pain and trauma and dysfunction had actually been his greatest gift because it taught him resilience at a cellular level. It taught him how to find stability in instability, how to love struggling people without losing himself in their struggle, how to be present for others without sacrificing his own well-being. Jack's emotional truth wasn't about forgiving his father despite the damage caused. It was about recognizing that the damage had actually been the foundation for his strength. The child who had to grow up too fast became an adult who could handle anything. The teenager who had to navigate family chaos became a man who could bring peace to any situation. The son who had to save his father became someone who could save himself. Jack realized his father hadn't failed him by being broken. His father had succeeded in raising him by showing him what broken looked like so Jack could choose to be whole. Ozzy's greatest achievement as a father wasn't his moments of strength. It was his willingness to let Jack see his weakness, because that transparency taught Jack how to be honest about his own struggles. This is the legacy Jack carries now. Not the rock star legacy, not fame or fortune or the family name, the legacy of breaking cycles, of turning trauma into wisdom, dysfunction into strength, pain into purpose. Jack didn't just survive his childhood, he transformed it into a superpower. This is what Jack wants every person who struggled with family dysfunction to understand. You are not broken by the broken people who raised you. You are forged by them. Every moment you had to be stronger than you should have been, every time you had to figure things out alone, Every instance where you had to be the adult in a room full of adults who couldn't handle their responsibilities, those moments didn't damage you. They prepared you to handle anything life could throw at you. Jack's message to the world is this:
Stop waiting for your parents to become who you needed them to be.
start becoming who you needed them to be. Stop trying to heal them. Start using what they taught you, even the painful lessons, to heal yourself and break the cycle for the next generation. The emotional truth Jack discovered is that love doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It requires showing up even when you don't know what you're doing, even when you're struggling, even when you're broken. His father showed up imperfectly, but he showed up. And that imperfect presence taught Jack how to show up perfectly for his own children. That's the real legacy. Not the music, not the fame, not the chaos. The decision to love better than you were loved, to be more present than your parents could be, to take everything that hurt you and use it as fuel to make sure the next generation hurts less. Jack Osbourne didn't just survive being Ozzy's son. He used that experience to become the father, the man, the person he was meant to be. And in doing so, he gave his father the greatest gift imaginable: the knowledge that despite everything, he had raised someone extraordinary.